Hi everybody, it's Cash. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. Today I've got something so interesting that I had to leap on here and tell you what it is before I forget the feelings that are associated with the pictures. Currently I'm working on another French episode. I'm in the middle of that, where I go around France testing the energy of a church here, a fortress there. And I am doing that and it will appear very soon. But somebody wrote to me and said, have you done pictures for, and they mean time travel type pictures, for Ötzi the Iceman? I had never heard of Ötzi the Iceman, and maybe I shouldn't have gone and looked it up there and then, but I did, and I saw a picture. It's a mummified body that's about 5,000 years old of a 45-year-old man who was buried in ice and is very, very well preserved. And it's become this mystery of who this guy was. Now, when I saw a photo of the mummy, immediately I started getting pictures and feelings, and I thought, oh, okay, I shouldn't have done this, but I'll tell you what they are before I forget. So that's what I'm going to do today. Really, really fascinating. And particularly fascinating is how long ago this was. He died about 5,000 years ago, and that is a very long time. Now, up here, where time has no measurement, it's really not a big deal, but it just feels to us like a very long time ago. Sometimes I can do it, and the details are really, really clear. Other times, they're more metaphorical and a little hazy, and I don't quite know what they mean. Before I get to Ötzi the Iceman, let me give you an example of one that didn't work out very well. Have you heard of Nazca lines? They are tiny little trenches that were dug about 2,000 years ago in the desert of southern Peru, in the Nazca Desert, by some civilization that wanted to communicate something to somebody. It's that vague. Nobody really knows what they were trying to do, but they were very prolific. I think there are something like 700 known examples of these hieroglyphs, but there are probably many, many more, because you can only see where they are if you go to a mountaintop or if you have a drone, because they're so huge. Some are simple straight lines and don't seem to amount to much, but others form the shape of trees and flowers, and there's a hummingbird and a spider and a monkey and so on. And people are incredibly intrigued by what these lines were. Archaeologists have examined them for years, and they've come to all sorts of conclusions, such as they're a way for calculating astronomical data back in those days. Or they, I think in the book Chariots of the Gods, they were said to be UFO landing sites. If you've been following the channel for long enough, you know that I don't really go to the extraterrestrial explanation first, because I think there's often something a lot more down to earth and pragmatic about these phenomena. But I was asked to go into that energy at one point, and I tried. I really did. I took maybe 3 examples. This was the first one. The terrain is riddled with little streams and stuff. That's what you're seeing. It looks like a delta, but you can also see the lines across the landscape there. And when I went into the energy of this particular picture, immediately I felt myself being pulled to the ground. It was so odd. And lying there while these 2 lines, obviously metaphorically speaking, these 2 lines came across my shoulders and down, pinning me to the ground. It was a bit like a car seat for a child. You put them in the little seat and then you put the straps on, you hold them in place. I felt like I was being held down, but voluntarily. And it was as if I was saying, okay, here we go, I'm going to strap myself in. It was for security, it was for self-defense, it was for protection against something that was about to happen. Now, bear in mind, back then people didn't understand weather patterns, they didn't understand natural phenomena like eclipses or thunder and lightning and so on. So they did their best to rationalize what was going on with superstition and so on. But I was strapped to the ground and couldn't move and was forced to look up at the sky, expecting something to happen, but pretty assured that thanks to the protection of these lines, nothing was going to touch me. It almost felt like I believed I was going to be wrenched from the earth and taken away by the gods or whoever these people believed in. And I was simply making sure that I couldn't leave the planet. I couldn't leave the ground. What I did get, though, was that they brought in specific people for these things. Specialists, you might say, because people went away, they were dispatched to draw the shapes or the lines or whatever, and then when they came back, I got a feeling of people saying to them, well, did it work? Was it okay? And the response was sort of, we'll have to see, we don't know. But we did our best, or I did my best, something like that. I know that sounds really weird, but that's the feeling I got about this. It was a joint effort led by specialist designers for the day, or sculptors for the day. It was a joint effort to communicate with either the gods, or the planets, or with passing phenomena. It just felt like something going by overhead. You know the way we see satellites or planes or helicopters going over at high altitudes? It's not out of the question that it was something extraterrestrial. I wouldn't poo-poo that completely, but it was all based on something up there. Something in the sky that I had seen and which I interpreted/misinterpreted as a visitation by the gods. Maybe a meteor went by, or a comet or something like that, and these people thought, oh no, it's coming, or something, and they were full of doom and pessimism and so on. But there was a sense of it was up there, and I was either protecting myself from it, or I was trying to appease it in some kind of way. So then I went into this second picture, and I got the image of, again, looking up at the sky. It was all about up there. It was nothing to do with down here at all. But when I looked up, it was like there was a mirror above me in the sky, reflecting down at me, or what I'd drawn. They were showing something to the beings they assumed were up there, surveilling them. It felt like they were being surveilled, and they were showing the people who were watching, the beings who were watching, the entities, what they'd done or what their life was like, or maybe even inviting them in. Like, yeah, come and visit, it's fine. But that felt very strong, even though I don't fully understand why they were doing that. But then I came to this particular photograph, and this to me suggested weather patterns. I have no idea why, but I was looking out and I could see a storm. Maybe in the distance, but there was lightning and thunder, and I couldn't quite decide whether I was trying to keep it away because I was scared, or whether I was trying to draw it towards me. Given how long it would take to make one of these shapes, which is a fairly long time, I would have thought, this had to be representative of a period of time. Maybe they wanted to attract rain, but they feared the wrath of the gods with the lightning and thunder and so on, and that was particularly scary. But it's so vague, right? So vague. I don't feel even now that I managed to get a grip on even a third of what this was about. It was too sprawling for the pictures, I thought. The exact opposite happened with Ötzi the Iceman, the 5,000-year-old mummy found in the Ötztal Alps, that's how he got his name, the Ötztal Alps in Italy, very close to the Austrian border. He was found pretty much intact in 1991 by two tourists who thought he was a recently deceased mountain climber. But it turns out he was from 3500 BC. Well, archaeologists, scientists took the mummy away and began examining him right down to the molecular level. They found out what he'd eaten, they found out that he'd been badly hurt, and just a lot of details about him. And I thought I would try to time travel in the way that we do and go into his energy and see what might happen, because there's a lot of mystery surrounding it, a lot of guesswork, a lot of scientific probing, but nobody really knows. But this time travel experiment that we're playing around with can throw up some really, really interesting details. And that's what happened with Ötzi the Iceman. Now, before I tell you the pictures, let me just say that I did them knowing nothing about this whole mummy thing. I looked at this particular photo, the pictures started coming, and the feelings started coming, and I jotted it all down, and only then, when I was finished, did I go and look up what this was all about. And it was so uncanny, it was so accurate, that it gave me chills and made me want to come on here and tell you what happened. So that's what I'm going to do now. But bear in mind, I knew nothing of this when I did the pictures. It was simply a stream of consciousness series of images. So when I went into the energy of Ötzi the Iceman, initially I saw fire, like a brazier. It was very makeshift. It had prongs to it. It reminded me very much of the logo for BBC Breakfast Time when it first went on air. Was that the 80s or the 90s? But it was a BBC show, and it had this logo. And it was very much like that, but curved around and made of, I would guess metal, but I wouldn't absolutely say it was. But it was a very odd shape, and it had a fire in it. There was nobody around. It was just on its own. And because it was nighttime and there were flames, it's almost like my eyes had to get used to the darkness because there was nothing else around. No light, no nothing. Behind the brazier, it wasn't a tent. It was an awning that had been like strung up over something and put down to the ground. And I thought initially that that's maybe where this man we're talking about lived. But it wasn't. Or maybe he partially lived there, but it wasn't. It was a storage place. It's where he kept his stuff, probably. Or it was a lookout. Or something. It's not where he spent his time. Because behind the awning was a hollow. I was first going to call it a cave, but it may not be a cave. It may just be a convenient hollow that he'd found that gave him shelter from the elements. Maybe. And that's why he wasn't under the awning, because that was simply for storage or something. But I went into this hollow, and I got the sense that that's where he would sit, facing the opening. He was scared. I was scared in a tingly way. Permanently. There was no rest. Even if I went to sleep, I was sitting down, but even if I went to sleep, which I think I did in my clothes, I don't think you got changed at night or anything. I think you just sort of keeled over and went to sleep. But you were ready to go if anything happened. That's what it felt like. And at some point, amid all this fear and the crackling of the fire outside, I heard something. Like a rustling or movement or something. I remember thinking, what is that? And I came to the conclusion, I think, that it was an animal. And I just sat there. I wasn't going to chase it for some reason. But as I sat there, I saw a shape in the darkness outside, which immediately set my nerves tingling. I was immediately on edge. Like, oh, who's this? Complete stranger. Had seen the fire and had come. But at the same time, I wanted to meet this person. It's like, oh, maybe I have a neighbour. Oh, great. There was that feeling, but you've got to be really wary. Like they are in westerns, cowboy movies where somebody rides into town and goes into the saloon and it goes quiet. Who is this stranger? And then within like 10 seconds, there's some kind of gunfight over nothing. It had that kind of edge to it. And I went outside and there was some kind of conversation. It began in a friendly fashion. I thought, like just a conversation, but with somebody who was equally on edge. And you say the wrong thing, and again, it's a bit like the westerns, you say the wrong thing, and suddenly everybody in the bar is brawling. Everybody in the saloon. It felt like that, and like I'd said something. Like the guy had come over and said, are you killing my animals, or something territorial like that. And I'd said, well, what's it to you? The wrong thing. And instead of reasoning it out, he had become immediately aggressive or belligerent. And at that point, it just devolved very quickly. And I sensed that I just ran off. I don't know, maybe there was a little bit of a scuffle or something, but I ran off. And he had some kind of rudimentary catapult thing or bow thing. Well, certainly wasn't a crossbow, I'm pretty sure, but it was like a rudimentary kind of like bow and arrow thing, like kids have. And he fired projectiles at me. One would guess arrows, but I wouldn't want to absolutely say that. But it was enough to scare me off. And I think I got hit in the back as I was running a couple of times. Or maybe I'd been wounded in the scuffle or something, but I ran off, leaving everything behind. I was very scared of whatever this person was threatening, and I ran off. And at some point, I think that whoever this was, this attacker, hit me. Maybe there were several attempts and a couple scratched me or knocked into me or something, but one finally hit home. But not enough to make me stop or fall to the ground. Or if I did fall to the ground, I got back up again and I continued running. Now, if that's where he died, this Ötzi character, so be it. But I didn't feel that. I felt like I kept going into the darkness. Maybe it was like hilly and he didn't follow me around the little hills or something, but I carried on going with this thing in me, but obviously in pain, in terrible pain and bleeding. And I think I just had to find somebody to help me take it out. And this is where it gets a little hazy, because I don't really remember now how it all went. It seemed to be like I just kept on going, and I found somebody to take this out, or I did something to myself to get it out, thinking, well, I'll just do this on a tree, or, well, it makes my toes curl, but something to get it out, because I was in pain and I was bleeding. But it didn't kill me instantly. It just killed me by attrition, in a way. I probably could have carried on, covered some distance in fear, eaten food even, or made a fire or something, I don't know, or met somebody and got their help, or whatever this was. I'm a bit hazy on the ending of this. But I ran off for a period of time until either infection got in or I bled away and had no strength left. But there were stages to this. There was like the fear sitting in my little hollow. the arrival of some stranger with quite friendly conversation that turned sour very rapidly. Maybe I was poaching this person's animals or something. I don't know what I would have eaten back then, but I assume animals, and maybe I'd been poaching or stealing or something, and this person was coming to tackle me about it. But a scuffle followed, and I ran off, and there were several attempts to fell me as I went, and one hit home. And then after that, it was a matter of time before either infection got me or I lost enough blood or just died. I don't know where this arrow struck, but somewhere in my back. And at some point, it just killed me, and I fell there and got covered in snow or something eventually. Or I don't know. But that bit I'm not very clear about, that final few minutes, hours, days, whatever it might have been. But up to that, it seemed very, very clear and not metaphorical at all, which so many of these pictures are. So, having done all of that and drawn those pictures, I then went and looked up the known facts about Ötzi the Iceman. You can do it yourself, by the way. You don't need me to relate them all to you, but indeed, he was shot in the back with an arrow. And I think the arrow head, whatever it was made of, some kind of metal, I guess, it was the copper age, so maybe copper, but it was lodged in his back, and the rest of the arrow had gone. And there was a suggestion that he travelled quite a distance and ate meals along the way. And according to scientists, archaeologists, Ötzi, whoever this character was, probably died of blood loss from the arrow. I had no idea until I saw it with my own eyes. And just as a postscript to all of that, I thought, I wonder if I can do his crossover to see if there are any clues there about how he died. And when I went into that energy, if you imagine a tunnel entrance, I often see this tunnel. It's the first stage of dying. There was a tunnel entrance, and he went into it really fast, but not far, maybe this distance, where there was a solid wall. And he smacked into the wall and gradually slid down it a bit at a time. This would be his dying process. It took a while. Yes, he was losing energy. That initial impact was being hit by an instrument of death. It could have been a dagger, I suppose, or it could have been a rock, but they're saying it's an arrow, so okay. That was when he got hit, and he knew that he had begun the process of dying, and he gradually slid down and landed at the bottom. And when I looked around, ahead, down a little way, was that meet and greet thing that I always see, which obviously applies to everybody of every generation that's ever lived, because I always see it. It's metaphorical, of course, but I always see it. And after he'd slid down, it was just a matter of gaining his bearings and his awareness that he was dead and there was no going back. And then he advanced towards the light and so on. So yeah, the moment he got hit, even at a subconscious level, he may not have known this consciously, but at a subconscious level, he must have realized that he was going to die. Down he got weaker and weaker and weaker, and then he landed at the bottom, and that was the end. Isn't that absolutely fascinating? Now it's all off my chest, and I can go and carry on with my video about the chateaux of France. But thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, guys, and I'll see you very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.